Welcome. Today we're going to be covering mobility devices, manual and power wheelchairs. We hope that this session is informative for you. I know when I first started, I just thought a wheelchair is a wheelchair, right? And I found out that's not true at all. So hope that you can gain something out of this that can be useful. So right here we have two manual wheelchairs. Generally, your categories of wheelchairs will fall into more of a basic hospital folding wheelchair and a more rigid style of wheelchair. The difference between these two is this one can fold up, hence the non-rigid portion of it. The other one does not fold up. Instead, the wheels pop off. And this is how you can transport it. As far as for the person, this is going to be for someone who is in this wheelchair for a short period of time. Maybe they don't have enough energy to get throughout the day, someone's pushing them, or maybe they're pushing themselves for short distances around the house. A rigid frame wheelchair is more for someone that they're living from their wheelchair. They're accomplishing all their tasks that day from the wheelchair. They're much lighter, they're much more easier to maneuver and get into spaces and load in and out of vehicles. Okay, next we're going to talk about power wheelchairs. This is more of a category of a person who doesn't have the strength to be rolling around in a manual wheelchair for extended periods of time especially. This power wheelchair here is designed for someone who's living in this wheelchair for most or if not all of the day long. This wheelchair over here is for someone who is living in it for parts of the day or can still shift around or stand up or other things. Looking at this wheelchair here, this is again for someone who is able to get up and move around a little bit, possibly. It is similar to a car seat where it's not customizable, it just is the size it is. The armrest on this could slide out or move up or change the angle, but the seat itself is pretty well fixed. For a wheelchair that someone is in it for most of the day, because they're in it for most of the day, they are someone who isn't going to be able to shift around or do as much pressure relief changes that need to happen throughout the day. Explain that a little further. If you are sitting for a while, say in a car or in a class or something, and every once in a while, maybe 10-15 minutes in the class, you'll kind of do a little subtle shift or even just a lean or whatever. Any of those movements is a pressure shift. For someone who can do that, this chair is perfectly adequate. For someone who cannot do that, hence someone who's living in it for most of the day, then this is a chair for them. This chair has a lot of the powered features on it. Okay, so this is power elevating leg rest. This one does reclining of the seat back and the legs. And then we have recline, so this is just like a recliner, right, in your house. Okay, we're reclining the seat back. We're able to bring it forward. All of those make sense from a comfort standpoint. This is the one though that might surprise a couple of you. This one's called tilt. So all the angles stay the same, but everything is just rotating it. In a casual term, some people call this stargazing mode. Okay. The point of this is very similar to pressure to bed sores. Pressure sores are developed because you have the constant pressure. It's not a large amount of pressure, but the key thing is it's constant on a particular area that stops blood flow from reaching that area. If someone can't shift their body to change that, we can shift their body relative to gravity to change where the pressure is being taken at, and hence that's where this tilt feature is coming into play. Change it from maybe the front of the legs to the back of the legs, different things like that. So they're not doing extreme pressure changes, but maybe like 5 to 10 degrees every couple hours throughout the day is enough to provide a preventative care for pressure sores. For those who are unfamiliar with bed sores or pressure sores, I know I was when I first started here. A little quick demonstration. On my hand here, I'm going to push. I'm providing more pressure than what my heart provides to my blood. It turns white, then it will return to blood flowing in the area. So that white is I am pushing the blood out of that area because I'm providing more pressure. I'm not hurting myself as I push, but if I continue to do this for days or for an extended period of time, right, then the blood will never make it to this area, and the cells that are in this area will not get nutrients or oxygen. These cells will die because they are suffocating and can never clear out or get anything. So these cells will eventually create a bruise, and that bruise will eventually open into an open wound, and that is a pressure sore or a bed sore. Constant pressure applied to a specific area that's greater than the pressure provided by your heart, such that no blood flows to that area. That's how a pressure sore develops. Talking about those types of wheelchairs that are customizable, whenever they are sold to a person, to an individual, there is someone, an assistive technology professional, that comes out and measures the person's body. Those measurements are sent to the manufacturer, who then builds the chair to fit that person, because it's their environment. They're living in it all day long. This chart here goes over what happens if you mess up and don't get your measurements right, or don't get their environment right. What can happen to their body as they live in it. This one is talking about if you don't get this hip saddle area in here the correct width, then you're going to end up with poor trunk control. This can also just occur from having the armrest too wide. If you sit in a chair with a very wide seat, you'll get the same feeling. Here is a seat where the bump that provides the support for locking the pelvis in is too far forward. The point of this is designed to stop you from sliding out of the chair. So if it's too far forward, you're going to slide forward. There's going to be a gap that develops between your back and the seat, and that may end up being you. This is an example where that bump has moved too far forward. Now we're putting pressure on the pelvis, and we're creating a pressure sore. Again, we're trying to avoid that. Okay. Couple different things here, but I'll hit mostly on this one as the last point. If you make the seat depth too long, shove on the back of the feet, there'll be that gap that develops that we just talked about. If we make it too short, we aren't actually changing anything on the person's anatomy, but we're not going to be capturing as much area as we could. And since pressure is force over area, if we capture a smaller amount of area, then the pressure is just going to go up overall. So we want to try and capture as much area as we can. All right, on the last chart, we were talking about measurements and getting that correct. This chart is talking about angles. The angles of the hip, the knee, and the ankles. Where golden standard rule is we want 90, 90, 90 for each one of these. This is going to help with circulation. This is going to help with posture and reducing energy consumption for the individual using it. So if we get the hip open too far, greater than 90 degrees, we're going to end up sliding out. If we get less than 90 degrees, poor circulation is going to occur. And that same thing will follow for each of the other joints. And to be honest, there are other injuries that can occur in those areas, especially with different ligaments and tendons. Okay, in these examples in this discussion, we've been considering the atypical human body. And what happens when we're not working with that atypical human body, but we're working with someone whose body is shaped a little differently? Well, a lot of these rules go out the windows, and you're going to be focusing on different guiding principles. Is the condition permanent or is it temporary? And temporary means, could it be temporary? Can we adjust it? Can we modify it? If it's permanent, then we're going to accommodate for it. So think of like a custom molded seat back, where the person maybe have a twist in their back, they sit in the seat, they initiate that chemical reaction that fills the foam around their back and custom molds to their back, right? We're not trying to straighten their back, we're just trying to form the chair to them. If we're trying to modify for that, an example here is if we have scoliosis. We're going to be adding laterals, not just randomly on the sides for support anymore, but we're adding it to actually try and guide the spine and its growth. This is particularly effective in the younger years. As the older you get, a little more stiffer, not as much flexibility there. These laterals being put in are not put in like a vice. We're not trying to squeeze and crush that spine. If we do that, we'll create a nice big pressure sores on the ribs, and that'll be very uncomfortable. But we want to put enough pressure support that as they grow and as they sit into it, the bones will shift and change to the direction that we're desiring them to go. As a recap for some of this, I want to help you remember that things we talked about with pressure sores, seat measurements, angles, conforming the chair to the person, all of that matters for someone who is in their chair for a majority of the day. It's for grandma who's getting in it for a short little trip, or coming out of the hospital, or people who are in it but can still shift and change. Maybe they just need to take the weight off their knee or their foot for a while. It doesn't matter for them. You're getting enough pressure sore changes that none of this will be relevant. So that's whenever you look at wheelchairs. A wheelchair is not just a wheelchair. There are different types of wheelchairs that match to people. There's a process for making sure we have the right equipment that will match for that person.